Welcome to Jack's Corner, where conservative values meet national headlines, and truth and reality have a seat at the table. From Louisville, Kentucky, here's your host, Jack Richardson.
Hey folks, welcome back to another edition of Jack's Corner, where truth and reality has a seat at the table. And we've got a lot to unpack today, and it has to do with the tariffs and what Trump is doing for the country to restore us, how we're going to be dealing with the challenging problem with not only world trade, but China, and the problem with some Republicans. And I just wrote and published a really extensive article called The Rattlesnake Handlers in Kentucky, and really dealing with what I call blind reality, or blind to reality. Now, you're probably wondering, well, what in the heck does rattlesnakes have to do with Kentucky, and particularly my frequent political commentaries? Well, let me explain. We all have experienced the religiously rigid, who are, as the old saying goes, so heavenly profound in a spiritual way that they are of no earthly good. Well, they are not, but then you get the point. And of course, we have all heard about the rattlesnake handlers who think that if you have enough faith that you can handle snakes without being bitten or dying from a bite. And then there are those who speak in tongues and say that if you can't speak in tongues, then you're not spiritual or you don't have the Spirit in you. Yeah, it's a rigidity that so many live in, and it ends up nowhere good. Well, this kind of rigidity is not just confined to some religious sects and cults, but also political ideologies. And it's wrong. For some, their political ideology so consumes them that they are blind to the realities that they're living in and that they face in the moment. What may be theoretically correct in one generation may not have any reality in the next. That is what is going on in Kentucky right now with some of our elected congressional Republicans. Now, for the first time in my life, we have finally got a president in office who has the courage of his convictions and to do the right thing to restore our country. This is after we've suffered traitors at the helm whose goal was to destroy our country and our constitutional freedoms, all for their misguided belief that socialism and communism or big government should be your God. Yeah, that was the Democratic Party, 2/3 of which identify as practicing atheists. And to them, they are God, and they want you to worship them as such. Only by the grace of God were we delivered out of the hands of Egypt, and Trump is trying to lead us and to restore our land and lead us into a golden age. And before I get into that, I want to tell you just a little bit about what the Democrats almost accomplished. And I call it correctly Democrat treason. In the 4 years of the Biden administration, they did everything to destroy us. And if you really wanted to destroy a country, the best way to do it would be exactly the way they did it under Biden and his administration. For instance, the first thing would be open the borders and falsely contend that you couldn't do anything about it, that the invasion was out of their control. But guess what? Trump fixed it in 60 days. They destroyed so many in this country with this lie that they should face severe punishment. And those who came into the country were sent to swing states so that the Democrats could never lose another election. Folks, this is treasonous. A second item I would say is that they spent $7 trillion to place the country further into debt over Biden's term. And guess what? They can't account for where the money went. Of course, we all know where it went. It went into organizations designed to subvert the country and was funneled into organizations that would launder it and use it to support Democrat candidates. Inflation was the cost that you paid, that we all paid. Another thing that you would do to destroy the country, and that they did do, is that they divided the country racially and indoctrinated the children and workers with DEI, pushing divisive cultural issues such as the transgender crap, and making people believe that men can become women and women can become men, and that biological men should play in women's sports. Well, the purpose was to create chaos, as chaos creates opportunity for the evil and particularly the left. Another item would be allowing foreign countries to tax our citizens with tariffs, which last year, now get this, last year exceeded $1 trillion. You were raped financially to the tune of $1 trillion. And you wonder why you can't afford some of the things that you want to buy today? To make things worse, on top of their tariffs against American goods, they also add VAT taxes, value-added taxes, and other schemes that make our exported items even more unaffordable in other countries. And to cap it all off, now get this. We had the entire Democratic Party caught in the greatest criminal enterprise and cover-up of all times. Basically, that party needs to be disbanded because they tried to convince you that Biden was mentally competent and fit to serve another 4 years as president. Folks, that's unforgivable. If I had my way and justice were done, I would put the entire Democratic Party and the Biden administration on trial for constitutional treason. Now, by the grace of God, we were given a reprieve, and Donald Trump won. Unfortunately, we have the thinnest of margins in both the Senate and the House. And that, too, was the failure of the Republican Party hierarchy in distributing needed funds to certain of its candidates because they thought they were too conservative and not part of the, clique. Well, that is a story for another time. But just as the Democrats stick together and are as thick as thieves, this is a time for the Republicans to do likewise. But they don't seem to be able to do that. And that brings me to the religious cults and the ideological purists. I can't stand them. I can't stand either of them. There are too many Republicans who act like some of these religious purists who believe that if you have enough faith, you can stick your hand down in a bag of rattlesnakes and not be harmed. Well, we have the same type of rigidity within the Republican Party in Kentucky at times. And it's these types of purists that we don't need in times like this when our country has narrowly avoided its destruction at the hands of the Democrats and under Biden. We have the slimmest of margins in Congress that is needed to fulfill President Trump's agenda to bring our country back from the brink of destruction. There is no time for anyone in the Republican Party to be detached from reality when we have the slimmest of chances to save the country. Political or ideological rigidity is an irrationality in the current climate, and I describe it in psychological terms as a psychosis. Given the brevity of time and the narrowest of windows to recover from the damage that the Democrats have done, this is no time for dissent within the Republican Party. And that brings me to my own state of Kentucky, where I see both U.S. senators and a congressman acting anything but rational or sensible or Republican in a time when we need them the most. If you are causing commotion in a lifeboat, you know what happens? They throw you overboard for the survival of the rest. I will remind my readers that I was one of the first supporters of Senator Rand Paul. And I, along with some of his other early supporters, have been talking about the heartburn we are all collectively feeling of late from his siding with Democrats on various issues, and particularly the tariff. Now, I know that Rand, like Trump, plays hardball to get and holds out at times until the end and then comes home. But now is not the time to play those types of strategies. Opposing the president in any form at this point is ill-advised and downright stupid. And let me remind my elected officials, I don't need your permission to differ with you on policy, and it doesn't make me an enemy when I do. Now, McConnell, Massie, and now Rand have become a thorn in the president's side, and to what end and what purpose? They certainly had no voice under Biden, nor when Senator Chuck Schumer was in control of the Senate. Now, I speak about Rand Paul for the first time in my occasional verbal discipline of Republicans, and I do so as a friend, but in disapproval of a tactic he is employing. I was first a fan of his father, who was and is a great man of his time, and I mostly agree with his philosophy. But now is not the time for Rand's philosophy, similar to his dad's, to become rigid. The application of those same philosophies with razor-thin margins in the Congress is a bad thing, and it's bad timing. Rand is not right about the tariffs, and there is a much bigger picture here going on, particularly with China and its allies called the BRICS. Think about this. China and its allies constitute the largest economy, and the U.S. and its allies, called the G7, China and its allies are bigger than we and the G7. How in the world did that happen? Folks, we are in deep troubles thanks to Democrats and some cowardly Republicans in Congress. My friend Rand is smart, but not smarter than the other collective 52 Republican senators. When Rand comes up for re-election, I will be supporting him, and again financially and with my vote. But if telling the truth and disagreeing costs a friendship, then so be it. Truth is not for sale. It's time for unity, not standing on ceremony or the rigidity of ideological theory. You cannot govern by that. I like principled people and am one, but to get anything done, if there is no political reality to your position, then it is not a solution at all. Think about this. Representative Massie was one and the only one of 218 Republicans in the House and of the House membership who voted against the president's budget. Is he telling us that he's smarter and wiser than the other 217? Again, I ask this question, to what end and what purpose? They can't answer that question. He knew he could not win and was only serving to be divisive. He certainly made the enemy, that is the Democrats, very happy. There is nothing wrong with principle, but to stand on principle when it does more harm than good speaks of the blindness and rigidity that serves no purpose. It betrayed needed unity, protecting the larger goal and issue of restoring the nation, and it betrayed his constituency. Let's not forget this, the meaning of the term representative. Now, as for McConnell, sadly, I've given up on him as he is clearly in the grips of acting out in vengeance and bitterness. He's not ending well. As with Massie, I ask again, to what end and purpose does McConnell's obstinance serve the party and the country? When he needed support as the majority leader in the Senate, and we were all proud of him here in Kentucky, he got it. He always had my financial support and voter support. But I will again remind people that Mitch was not and is not perfect. Powerful once, yes, but flawed as we all are. Mitch backed many a loser who betrayed him, the party and the country, such as former Senator Arlen Specter from Pennsylvania and former Senator Charlie Crist of Florida. He helped get both elected over more conservative candidates, and then both of them, after they won, switched over to the Democrat Party. Friends, stop worshiping your leaders. They are all flawed and sure to disappoint. Start exercising some common sense and letting your voices be heard. After all, they are your employees. Then, as mentioned, we have Rand Paul, who seems to have joined the chorus, hopefully temporarily. It's all disturbing given that their constituency in Kentucky voted for Trump over Harris by 30 points. Folks, it's time to make your voice heard. I serve on the state executive committee for Kentucky for the Republican Party, and I speak frequently with Republicans in Kentucky, the Kentucky legislature and all over the country. And believe me, when their people call with complaints, it registers. You need to exercise that voice at the state and federal levels and in the loudest fashion, and remind them that 2026 is just around the corner and we need unity, not divisiveness. Now, don't get me wrong. For the most part, I agree with these legislators on most matters, but that doesn't mean I can't express my disapproval when I think they are off base, and in this instance, way off base. And no, they are not smarter than me or many of you, and they are not the repositories of all knowledge or information or supreme political strategists. After all, if they were, they wouldn't have lost every vote that they cast against the president thus far. Think about that. Folks, you cannot govern by ideology. It can serve as a guide and a general worldview and as a pattern, but not to the point of rigidity when the stakes are so high. When you need every vote and supporter that you can get, you certainly do not need to give aid and comfort to the enemy by making them think there are cracks in our armor. Or is there? If there is, we need to find out now, well before 2026. We need team players, not rogues swinging their swords like Don Quixote in his delusional fight against windmills, thinking he was going to win this battle against an imaginary force all by his lonesome. Let me also clarify that I'm not one of these easily irritated or disgruntled Republicans who get mad at the slightest offense or disagreement. I served nearly 10 years as chairman of the largest Republican organization in the state of Kentucky and as a national delegate and a Trump elector. There are many times I had to bite my tongue on issues because of extenuating circumstances, and that unity was more important than my exceptions given the realities of the moment. And this is a moment when Republicans have to stick together. It was the wise thing for me to do at the time, and I was not going to give aid and comfort to the enemy. And oh yes, folks, yes, there is an enemy, and the Democrat Party is that enemy to life, liberty, and happiness, as they have revealed over the last 4 years. More than that, they are the enemy of truth. They are in league with the father of lies, and you see it displayed every night on the news, and they never pass a fact check. Imagine that. Based on decades of experience in business, law, and politics, there is one thing I can tell you for a certainty. Just because you sit in a Senate or House seat in Washington, D.C. or wear a black robe does not imbue you with superior knowledge or information, nor make you a genius. Of course, I didn't need to tell you that, particularly when there's a representative sitting up there right now who believes that islands float and can capsize. Now, that's no joke. I have it on tape. And I could list 100 others just like him, and they are just as stupid. I just can't imagine that this country is being run with so much stupidity up there, but a lot of that's the media fault and people who are not paying attention. I've written enough about that, and I think we all know by now that the last people you want running your economy are those in Congress. Can you imagine how many years it would take for them to negotiate a trade deal or a tariff deal with another country as slow as they move? Too few of them have any business experience or knowledge of economics, of which I have both, including a law degree where I have practiced business law for most of my life. So insofar as Kentucky's Republican rattlesnake handlers, I want to ask the simple question: to what purpose and to what end, what good end does this all serve the nation, and particularly your constituency who voted for Trump by over 30% to be opposing the president on the budget and tariffs? Remember, you're up there to serve your constituency, not yourself. And when I see these Republicans, and not just those from Kentucky, get on TV and talk about tariffs, oh, how I cringe. I cringe with embarrassment because I know the things that they are saying are just dead wrong, and they don't know what the hell they're talking about. I have conferred with economists and analysts locally and around the country, and I've read and studied enough to know that not only has this country been raped by the tariffs placed by other countries upon America, but then to add salt to the wound, our so-called frenemies scam us again with VAT taxes and other devices to soak us for our monies. And all the while we are paying to protect their freedoms with our nuclear umbrella. Folks, don't expect any gratitude from them. They've gotten used to taking advantage of us because we were stupid enough to allow it, and we had stupid politicians in Congress that didn't know enough to stop it. President Trump has more business and economic sense in his little finger than the total of everyone in Congress, and his success is proof of that. They haven't a leg to stand on when opposing his plan to restore the country's economy, military, or our standing in the world. As of this writing, and as I have said in my article a few days ago entitled Thank You, Thank You, Thank You, I warned those about panic and how the markets reacted and overreacted to the tariffs. Since then, the markets have rebounded, and at one point, they jumped 3,000 points as of the close on April the 9th. Markets are volatile and no guide to the state of the economy. So, do you have any idea as to how much the panicans have lost in that panic? Better yet, have you any idea how much money others made off of their panic? Maybe your panic? Folks, Trump is monumentally a historic figure. You are living in such a time that most people in American history only read about. No Republican could have ever done what Trump has done and what he is doing. No Republican could have defeated Hillary Clinton, which would have no doubt ended our republic. None of the Republican Harvard cricket players could have beaten her. they would have given it the good old boy slap on the back of each other while they were drinking the scotch, saying to each other, "Good try, old boy." Well, I'm tired and disgusted with these types of patricians who live in the delusional world of a greatness that they'll never have. I've never known another man like Trump who has sacrificed more to save his country than he, given all he's been through, including 2 assassination attempts. What audacity it must take to question his authority at this time, given the dire world situation we're in. And most of you don't really know how bad it is. Every Republican owes him a debt of gratitude that they could never pay. After all, they have a majority to thank him for. Now, as Breitbart News recently and accurately reported, Trump outmaneuvered the markets, our allies, and China in one day. My good friend Rod D. Martin, founder of Martin Capital, recently interviewed with Fox Business to break down President Trump's winning strategy on tariffs. Countries around the globe are now lowering tariffs on our products and negotiating. Now, here's my question. Why in the hell, as a Republican, would you ever want to find yourself at odds with Trump's proven success? Well, it appears that 3 of Kentucky's top Republicans have. Maybe they need a good stiff shot of Kentucky Bourbon to bring them back to their senses. Yet I can still be their friend, and I'm sure I'll be getting more letters asking for contributions, but not on their terms. I'm my own man. They have never rejected my contributions or votes. But with that, I did not agree to keep my mouth shut, and I'm shouting out, as I should, to all their supporters. Tell them to get in line with the program. Also, while Rand says that tariffs are not a problem, I beg to differ with my good friend. Over 100 countries are ready to negotiate their tariffs that will benefit Americans, and there is much more at play than just the tariffs, which I will explain. But, however, Trump gave a pause on tariffs for 90 days and the markets responded. But more importantly, Trump is isolating that monster China, which is a threat to the whole world, thanks to stupid former American presidents on their foreign policies. And that goes for both Democrats and Republicans. Let me digress for a moment. Bush, and that's President Bush, foolishly believed, with nothing to back up his gut feeling, that democracy could be spread around the world. He apparently wasn't very good at history, or he would have remembered that our forefathers said the government they had given us was one that was only fitting for a moral people. Even they had doubts as to whether or not we could keep such a marvelous thing. No, the rest of the world cannot be democracies, as the basis for it doesn't even exist. The primary operating program for Western culture and democracies is the Judeo-Christianity model. All we did in that foolish adventure of trying to democratize the world was enrich our enemies. And now back to the point. Trump is winning, and it would be wise for Kentucky congressional Republicans to get on board and start listening to their constituents. If you can read between the lines, you would know that Xi Jinping of China is close to being deposed, and there is a civil war going on in the CCP, but they are very dangerous. This is a dangerous time. And Xi is an old-style communist in the mold of Mao Zedong, the greatest mass murderer of all history. Don't think otherwise. And Trump knows more and has more up his sleeve than most of the idiots do in Congress. After all, he has much more resources as a president and information at his disposal than any member of Congress does. There is much more at play here than most think. It's not just about tariffs. It's much more than that. So to congressional Republicans, please shut up. Stop acting out your incompetence in front of the enemy media. And God help me with my irascibility in dealing with those folks who think and act as if they know more than they do. If you ever played poker and you know you have a weak hand, you sure don't show it. And Trump knows what he needs to do, and he knows what he is doing. So let's send Republicans to poker school, and maybe they might just start winning. One more thought. Yes, other countries may make things cheaper than in America, but I would rather pay American workers more for the products I buy so they can feed and raise a family as opposed to feeding a culture that hates and wants death to America. How ungrateful could you be to God, who blessed us so richly with this country? Yes, I would rather work longer hours to be able to afford American-made products so American families can live. I don't always make myself popular in expressing my opinions so openly as I do, and particularly about Republicans and other Republicans, but popularity should play no role in speaking truth to power. This is where you, the reader, comes in. Exercise your right to free speech while you still have it. You won't keep it long if rigid Republicans keep getting in Trump's way. So speak up and speak loudly. Now, I want to deal with another topic here, and I've entitled this The Delusion of Perfection from Imperfection. And I was inspired a bit by as I always am on Sunday, by my pastor, but he brought something up that really unlocked some thoughts for me. But, I got to thinking about how in this world and today, we believe in the perfectibility of man, which is so ridiculous. But there's this psychotic belief that the imperfect can create the perfect, and it infects us today. It's the zeitgeist of the age, or what we call the spirit of the age. It is a profoundly evil spirit that tells us that man can reach perfection on his own. What's amusing about that is that we were created perfect, but we sure screwed that up. And now we think that we can get it back and get back into the garden. And it is from this attitude that all the chaos in the modern world arises. Now, my minister started off with a sermon Sunday referencing a well-known novel that was made into a movie where a community of men were going to create the perfect wife, doing everything that pleased them. And it was called The Stepford Wives. And I found the movie a mix of absurdity, amusement, and horror. The amusement part is how stupid it is to think that the imperfect man could create a perfect woman. After all, perfection doesn't come from the imperfect any more than good fruit comes from a bad tree. Then there was the inevitable horror at the end, being a catastrophic boomerang of the men's own imperfection and to his demise. The so-called perfect couldn't get the programming correct. Well, in part, we are all living that today. Some of us are dangerously in a utopian vision trying to create perfection. I call them liberals, leftists, and Democrats. And you saw how their Stepford experiment ended with Biden. Now, I'm going to circle back to this in a moment, but I'm not suggesting anything against science or human progress, but we have such a wrong view of science and our own technology today as our Savior. No, it's not our Savior. In fact, the science of God is so amazing as opposed to the God of science. Now think about that for a second. How miserable we have failed in making science our God and the seeming answer to everything, when in fact it is God who created the science we now explore. Oh, how we struggle to create perfection through science when it is merely an investigative tool for us to learn and discover our Creator. This reminds me of the Star Trek movie. It was the first major motion picture from that tremendously popular TV series back in the 60s of the same name. In that movie, there was a major, massive alien presence coming toward Earth, bigger than all the planets, and it was closing in on Earth. And so the Starship Enterprise was sent out to investigate. And upon contact, Kirk and the crew realized that this entity contained all the information in the known galaxy, and its mission was to find the Creator. And anything that got in its way in not finding the Creator was considered an infestation and had to be destroyed. And the infestation was blocking that entity from finding the Creator. Well, the name of that entity, that big alien entity, was V'ger, from meeting and discovering its maker. And toward the end, when it discovered that man was its creator, V'ger couldn't accept the fact that in all of its perfection, which was identified with the quantum of knowledge, or all that was capable of being known that it had gathered, that it couldn't have come from humans. They were imperfect. In other words, perfection can't come from imperfection. Well, Captain Kirk discovered that V'ger was our information gathering probe that was sent out hundreds of years earlier to collect all the data that could possibly be collected, and in doing so became this massive entity looking not just for the creator, but its purpose, which it did once it found what made it, that is, its maker. And it turns out that V'ger was really Voyager. In the long journey, some of the letters had been worn off, and it only knew itself as V'ger. So Kirk patched in the code so that V'ger could complete its programming and download all information to its creator, man. So here we are today looking for our purpose, our maker, our creator, in all the wrong places and thinking that we can reach perfection on our own. Well, in all of our science and shoving God aside in order to find him, we have made science God. Our programming has gone haywire and the basis of our foundational inquiry is flawed, and we are in the way of finding the creator, so to speak. It's much like trying to get a geometric formula correct when you start toying around with the given. Now, the term given means a known or established fact. Now, if you want to get to an answer, the correct answer, then the fundamentals have to be correct. You have to start with what is established fact and that which is unquestionable, or you will never find the answer. Now, I can imagine that the greatest frustration of various scientists who claim to be unbelievers working in a science laboratory is looking at formulas and evidence that scream of design, negating the perfection of life, that existence is merely random. To go there, you literally have to actively deny all your sensory input that is communicating to your brain that is fundamental to answering every question that exists. What a fool's errand that has to be. What's so amusing about that is that if you can't figure out the why of what you're studying because you don't know the basis and the basic foundation of that why, then what would make you think that you're going to be able to create any answers from your delusional theories totally devoid of the reality in which you're currently living, starting with every atom in your body? It's something like the kid trying to paint a painting for the first time and he can't quite communicate onto the canvas what his eyes are seeing. And after struggling with it for a while, he gets frustrated and takes his paintbrush and angrily and hastily runs his brush back and forth, destroying what he had started. Well, that's much like what is going on in today's world with destroying definitions and uniquenesses amongst us, and most importantly, what you could call geometric givens, such as the biological and genetic differences between men and women, or that day is different than night, or water is wet and fire is hot. We have the sea, which is different from the land, and what lives in the sea does not live on the land, and vice versa. But I say all this for the purpose of making the connection to the mad scientists of today, the Stepfords of today, the atheists and everyone else who are frustrated with that paintbrush in their hand that if they can't figure it out, then they're just going to mess it all up for everyone else. And if it results in killing us and killing everyone, then so be it. They know God, even though they will deny it, but they hate him and anyone else who forms a foundation upon that belief. So they claim that men can be women and the on and on nonsense that we disgrace ourselves with by even engaging in such a debate like that. And now think about this. If we got the fundamentals right and accepted the basic givens in this life, as I have just listed, instead of trying to make everything into an homogenized mess, what marvelous things might we just discover through God's science? You see, so many of the premises upon which we work today are politically and ideologically driven and not by sound facts or evidence. Today, there are those psychos who want to scrap all the reality that presents itself to us every day from the moment we wake till the moment we go to sleep. And these imperfects in mind and body are determined to recreate things the way they want. Now, they, in this instance, is the individual psychotic who has a different trigger point or mental problem, and the only thing they have in common is that they all are miserable with their lives, and they want to destroy the joy, and they do destroy the joy that they could have through their envious comparison to others. So, for example, you have someone who has a sexual disorientation that they don't want to admit to, so they simply claim to be of the opposite sex, the transgender craze, and so that they can get what they think that they want. And they are going to force that upon the rest of society. And we've all been subjected to that and victimized by it. Or you have the lazy slob who wants to be cared for and wants to blame everybody else. They will blame the productive rich man who has what the lazy man or the lazy loser wants. So now the loser tries to convince the rest of the world that the productive rich man doesn't deserve what he has. The examples could go on, but I believe you get the point that there is a design to all the chaos and psychosis today because we're denying our foundations. How much more would we learn about life, about science, about cures, and so many other things if we just started out with the basic, simple principle of in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Think about that. That verse alone is so packed with wisdom and the beginning of scientific inquiry of our existence and the facts of life that libraries are filled with books about it. And today, science is, to the great frustration and exhaustion of atheists, proving God, our creator, and our purpose daily. As the old saying goes, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, is the definition of insanity. You'd think they'd say, well, let's give what's already been told and given us a try for a chance. What amazing discoveries of life itself would be made, and a whole new horizon of joy, happiness would erupt, because we'd no longer be living under the delusion of the lies that are impossible to bring any happiness. So, given this Easter season, let's get it right. Let's start from the beginning and end with the grace of Jesus Christ that forgives us for how we messed up the perfection and gives us a way back. So with that, folks, I hope that you have a happy Easter, and I will see you next week. This is Jack's Corner, and I'm Jack Richardson.